very complicated.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. How's everybody doing? My name is Gabriel Scott, and I'm an author, a public speaker, also youth development specialist at the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Western Reserve here in Akron. And during this event at Akron University, Rethinking Race, Black, White, and Beyond, and the name of this lecture, Black History Biographies. And so I'm going to be talking about different African Americans in history, mostly unsung pioneers and innovators within our history. Okay? So please pay a lot of attention. I really hope everybody will learn something during this lecture. It'll be about 2 hours, so bear with me. It'll be about a 2-hour lecture. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Has anybody ever heard of Cardinal Woodson before? Cardinal Woodson. Okay, Cardinal Woodson is considered to be the father of black history. And he got his start in Pennsylvania. And at a very young age, he took interest in African American history, African American diaspora, the African diaspora, which was a system where Africans were being dispersed out of Africa to different countries and different continents around the world. The African diaspora, slavery, and of course just African American history in general. In his early 50s, he co-founded the Association of the Study of Negro Life and History. Association of the Study of Negro Life and History. And I'm sure everybody in here has heard the term Negro before and knows what Negro means. He wanted to set up a system where achievements and accomplishments of African Americans could be celebrated. So what he did was co-founding the Association of Negro Life and History. He founded National Negro History Week. National Negro History Week. And it lasted for just 1 week. And that was for the second week of February to commemorate and celebrate the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. President Lincoln was born February 12th, 1809. Frederick Douglass was also born in February 14th, Valentine's Day. So he specifically chose the second week of February to commemorate the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and the birthday of Frederick Douglass. Okay? One of his most well-known books that he's the author of is called The Miseducation of the Negro, published in 1933. Miseducation of the Negro is a powerful book. I suggest that you read it if you have the interest to read it. It's a great book, powerful book. Cardinal Woodson explains and goes through a whole lot in this book. It's about 200 pages long, and it's really interesting of how Cardinal Woodson at that time was so brilliant-minded, very intelligent, very intellectual for an African-American male. At that time, we're talking the late 1800s, early 1900s, 19-teens, 1920s, just brilliant-minded. You'll be just amazed by what you read in this book. And I've read the whole book, by the way. It's powerful. Some of you might be wondering, who this guy is. This is Frederic Bartholdi, who's from France. He was a French sculptor. And being a French sculptor and being over there in France, just like in the United States, slavery went on in here, in this country. Well, there was also an enslavement system over in France, where people were being enslaved, they were in bondage, humiliation, they were being tormented emotionally and physically. And so Frederic Bartholdi, he wanted to give the United States a gift. And that gift was to honor Americans, the United States, with something to honor the black soldiers during the Civil War. And he also wanted to honor the United States for freed slaves, emancipation. Okay, slaves had been freed after the Civil War. So he wanted to honor the United States with a gift. And his gift was to establish a landmark of liberation. And that landmark was the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so if you guys look at these two photos here, pay very close attention to these two photos. The photo on the left was the original Statue of Liberty. Okay, a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people don't know this. About 0.5% of Americans, if that, know this type of information in origin of where the Statue of Liberty even comes from. This is what you call a very untold hidden history. That picture on the left is the original picture and idea and construction of the Statue of Liberty. It was of a black woman. A lot of people don't know that. Okay, she had shackles around both of her ankles, and she had shackles or chains around her wrists. Okay, so Frederick Bartholdi, the French guy I was just talking to you about, he submitted that idea to the United States. And guess what they did? Okay, the white Americans, unfortunately, they declined it. They declined that whole idea. There's no way we're going to have a Statue of Liberty standing in our New York Bay, in New York, and it's going to be of a black woman. There's no way we're going to have that. So they declined it immediately. They didn't tolerate it. They didn't appreciate it. Most importantly, they weren't going to relate to that. Okay? So they sent it back to Frederick Bartholdi and his people, his partners. They got their heads back together, and they had to reconstruct that whole idea and blueprint. So what they did was they constructed the face, and what they did, they gave the Statue of Liberty more of a Caucasian, kind of a Roman-looking face. And that's the face that we have right now, the Statue of Liberty, to the right. And we're all familiar with the Statue of Liberty. We've all seen it on TV, movies, magazines, internet, television, maybe even in person. Okay? Not only did they change the whole face, but they changed what she's holding, what Lady Liberty is holding. They took the chains off the wrists, and now she's holding a torch. They put a torch in her right hand. They took the chains off of her left wrist. Now she's holding a tablet. They put a tablet in her left hand. Okay? They also changed the clothing, as you can see. And if you see in this next picture, this is a close-up picture of the real Statue of Liberty. And if you look there, to the left of her foot, of her left foot, that chain is still there. That chain is still there. And so that's a big sign that the true and original initial construction and idea was of an African American woman. Okay? And unfortunately, the U.S. and the Americans at that time, they couldn't relate to it, and they didn't want to relate to it, unfortunately. Has anybody ever heard of Joseph Cinqué? Okay, Joseph Cinqué led a revolt, a mutiny, same thing as a revolt or rebellion, on the very famous ship called the Amistad. Who's ever heard of the Amistad? Who's seen the movie called the Amistad? Well, the movie called the Amistad is based off of this man here, Joseph Cinqué. He was an African from Sierra Leone. If you're not familiar with Sierra Leone is a West African country. It's one of the smallest countries in Africa, along with Liberia, Togo, Tunisia, Ghana, and a few others. All the way west of Africa, Sierra Leone. And what happened was, Joseph Cinqué and about 50 of his followers had been kidnapped. They had been taken captive by a couple of Spaniards, Spanish people. A guy by the last name Ruiz, and a guy with the last name of Montez. They kidnapped him, his followers, and they were going to ship them off to Cuba, all the way to Cuba, okay, to be enslaved on sugar plantations. So in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, they were transported on the very famous ship called the Amistad. And what happened was, while in the water, Joseph Cinque and his followers, they took full control. And so they held Montez and Ruiz captive. They killed Ruiz and some of his people, and they let Montez live. And so Joseph Cinque, he ordered Montez to steer the ship. He ordered him to steal the ship, forced him to steal the ship. And Joseph Cinque's initial intention was to go back to his homeland, Sierra Leone. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. What happened was, since he forced Montez to steer the ship, Montez steered the ship all the way up the Atlantic coast, all the way up to Long Island, New York. So he went in a totally different direction. Sierra Leone is West African country. In West Africa, he steered the ship all the way up Atlantic coast, all the way to New York. Okay? So they landed in New York, and there was a trial in Connecticut. And the trial lasted for about 2 weeks. Okay? And fortunately for Joseph Cinque and his followers, former president of the United States, the sixth president, John Quincy Adams, defended them. Now, the current president at that time, the eighth president of the United States, Martin Van Buren, were against them. Okay? And so, luckily for them, John Quincy Adams defended them. They ended up winning the whole trial because they had been taken captive over in their homeland and illegally taken across the Atlantic Ocean. They had not yet made it to Cuba yet, but illegally taken from their homeland across the Atlantic and then taken illegally all the way up the Atlantic coast to New York. And so they were set free. They won the trial. Joseph Cinque and his followers won the trial, and they were sent back to Sierra Leone. So it was a very successful trial, and a lot of credit was given to former President John Quincy Adams. So try to remember that name, Joseph Cinque. He's the base and foundation of the very famous ship and movie, The Amistad. So while we're on the subject of revolts and rebellions, these are 4 other rebellions that took place in history. In 1800, a man by the name of Gabriel Prosser, his name was Gabriel, and he was a fugitive slave, a fugitive. In 1800, he led a revolt where he gathered a bunch of his men, black men, together, and they held a lot of white individuals captive. About 70 of them. They ended up killing all of them. They were later captured and killed. And just ironic that Gabriel had a brother named Solomon. They were both blacksmiths, okay? Had a brother named Solomon, his older brother. And they were the ones to lead these other black fugitive slaves to capture these white individuals, about 70 of them. And they killed them, and later Gabriel and Solomon and their followers were also killed. In 1822, Denmark Vesey was also a fugitive slave in South Carolina. Denmark Vesey also, just like Gabriel and Solomon, he also led a revolt. Captured a lot of white individuals and was later captured and executed along with his followers. Down to the bottom left, 1831, Nat Turner. Nat Turner, another fugitive black slave in Virginia. Along with his followers, captured a lot of white individuals, about 100 of them, killed all of them. Later, he was captured and killed, executed. Now, in 1859, the bottom right, that's John Brown. He was a white abolitionist. John Brown, A lot of us have heard about John Brown before. John Brown has his own house here. He lived right here in Akron in the 1840s. He lived in Akron for about 8 years, from about 1840 to 1848. Okay, he lived diagonally across the street from Simon Perkins, the Simon Perkins mansion, right there on Copley Road. And that's where John Brown lived for 8 years, right here in Akron. He was also an abolitionist, and he was on the same side as black folk. Okay, he led a slave rebellion in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, which is now modern-day West Virginia. He led a slave revolt, and later on he was captured and executed. And he was a white abolitionist, John Brown. All right, Alexander Twilight. A lot of people have never heard of Alexander Twilight. Alexander Twilight is the first African American to graduate from college in the United States. He's the first African American to graduate from college in the United States. He graduated from Middlebury College in the state of Vermont. Now, we don't hear about the state of Vermont a whole lot. It's kind of a silent state. You don't hear a lot about Vermont. But he graduated from Middlebury College in Vermont in the field of theology, which is the study of the Bible, the study of God, and also education. He believed a lot in education as well. So Alexander Twilight, first African American to graduate from college in the United States. That was in 1823, by the way, 1823. And while I'm on that subject, Mary Jane Patterson. Mary Jane Patterson, first African American female to graduate from college. First African American female to graduate from college in the United States of America. She graduated from Oberlin College, that's located right here in Ohio, okay, in the field of education, to be a teacher. Okay, so try to remember that name, Mary Jane Patterson. If you want to take notes, feel free to take notes if you want. Mary Jane Patterson, first African American female to graduate from college in the United States, and that was in 1862. That was during the Civil War, 1862. A lot of people haven't heard about Anderson Abbott either. He's another unsung pioneer. And like I mentioned to you before, a lot of these people I'm going to be talking about are unsung people, unsung pioneers, innovators within African American history. Anderson Abbott is definitely one. He is the first Canadian-born black doctor or physician. The first Canadian-born black doctor or physician. And he was good friends with President Abraham Lincoln. Good friends. They met during the Civil War. Anderson Abbott got his degree from Oberlin as well. Just like Mary Jane Patterson, he got his degree from Oberlin. That was located right here in Ohio, which at the time, Oberlin College was very well known. It was a very famous college in the United States, one of the only colleges that allow blacks to attend and get their degrees in education. Oberlin College right here in Ohio. But going back to Anderson Abbott, he was good friends with President Lincoln. On April 14, 1865, in D.C., President Lincoln and his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, were going to see a play called Our American Cousin at Forest Theater. And the play started at 8 o'clock p.m. Well, the Lincolns were a half an hour late. They showed up at around 8:30. And they got to the president's box, which is his own little private area in the theater. And once they got there, of course, the crowd gave them a standing ovation. And the orchestra played Hail to the Chief. And they did that for about 5 minutes. It was about a 5-minute standing ovation. And within about 15 minutes, in the second half of the play, a man by the name of John Wilkes Booth, who a lot of people don't know, wasn't just an actor, but he was also part of the European banking system, fraud, corruption. And he was ordered by the European bankers to take out the head of the U.S., which at the time was President Lincoln. And so John Wilkes Booth snuck into the president's box, and he stood about five feet behind Lincoln and pointed the Derringer behind Lincoln's head and fired, okay? And right after that, John Wilkes Booth leaped from the stage about 11 feet onto the stage, and he leapt out of the back of the theater. Now, there were two Caucasian doctors that were on the scene quickly. And that was a Dr. Leal and a Dr. Barnes. They were both white doctors. And so they carried him, along with some other people, they carried Lincoln's almost lifeless body out of the theater across the street to a boarding house called the Peterson House that was established by a man named John Peterson. And they carried Lincoln's body up the steps to a very small room, That's a real photo of the room there, the actual bed that Lincoln passed away on. But they carried him to this small room, and they laid Lincoln diagonally across the bed. They laid him diagonally because Lincoln was so tall. He stood 6'4". So in order to get his whole body on the bed, they laid him diagonally across the bed. The following morning at approximately 7:22 a.m., on April 15th, Lincoln passed away. Now, a lot of people don't talk about this. This is another untold, very hidden history that people just do not talk about, is that there was a black doctor in the room. And that was Dr. Anderson Abbott, this guy here. Anderson Abbott was a doctor. He was the only black person in the room at the time Lincoln died. Now, you can look up the death of Abraham Lincoln on Google, Yahoo, whatever search engine you might use, and I guarantee you will see nothing but Caucasian faces. And people don't talk about that there was a black doctor, a black person in the room at the time of his death. And he was Dr. Anderson Abbott. Close friends, and he actually aided on President Lincoln, along with Dr. Barnes, along with Dr. Leal, and a couple other Caucasian doctors. He was very close to the family. After Lincoln passed away, Mary Todd Lincoln wanted to give Dr. Abbott a souvenir. So she gave Dr. Abbott one of Lincoln's shawls. If you don't know what a shawl is, S-H-A-W-L. A shawl is a very large piece of clothing. It looks like a very large scarf that you wrap around the torso and the neck. And she gave that to Dr. Abbott as a souvenir from President Lincoln for him to keep. Okay, so try to remember that name, Dr. Anderson Abbott. Canadian-born black doctor and physician, close friends with President Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln. He was the only black face in the room at the time of Lincoln's death, and he actually aided on President Lincoln before he passed away. People don't talk about that. Lewis Latimer. A lot of people have never heard of Lewis Latimer. Okay, Lewis Latimer is also an unsung pioneer. We've all heard of Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Okay, he gets credit for inventing the light bulb, but Lewis Latimer, believe it or not, created the long-lasting filament to go in a light bulb. That's why to this very day, we have light bulbs that last up to a month, 2 months, maybe even 3 months before you replace it. And we have to give credit to Lewis Latimer for that. Before Lewis Latimer even came about, Thomas Edison could not figure out how to create a filament that would last longer than 3 minutes. He created a filament that would only last up to 3 minutes and it would burn out. Lewis Latimer came along and created a carbon filament, which is a long-lasting filament to last up to a month or two. Okay? He got his start working underneath Alexander Graham Bell. Alexander Graham Bell, if you're not familiar with Alexander Graham Bell, he invented the telephone. Okay, Alexander Graham Bell. Lewis Latimer has a lot of patents underneath Alexander Graham Bell with the invention of the telephone. And he then moved on to a company called Hiram Maxim. It was an electricity company. Okay? The Edison Lighting Company took notice to Lewis Latimer's skills and ability, regardless of the color of his skin and his race. They took notice to it, and he said, well, we're not looking at the fact that he's black. We like his skills. We like his brilliant mind. We like his talent, his gift. He was very bright in the field of electricity and draftsmanship. And so they hired Lewis Latimer. This was in the 1880s. They hired him. And he went on to develop more patents, about 50 patents in the field of electricity. And Lewis Latimer also, he wrote the first textbook ever written in the United States on electricity. He wrote the very first textbook ever written in the United States on the subject of electricity. He was just that good. Daniel Hale Williams, he's another unsung pioneer. People don't talk about him either. Daniel Hale Williams is the first person to perform a successful open heart surgery. The first person to perform the first successful open heart surgery. He got his career started at Chicago Medical School in Chicago underneath the teaching of Dr. Henry Palmer, who was a very, very prosperous, a very skillful black doctor in Chicago. He got his teaching underneath him. Dr. Henry Palmer took a young Daniel Hale Williams under his wing and taught Daniel Hale Williams everything he needed to know on the subject of medicine. This is Providence Hospital, and hopefully you guys can see that. I know the light is shining through the window, so hopefully you can see it. Providence Hospital. Dr. Daniel Hale Williams established the first integrated hospital in the United States. And this was it, Providence Hospital in Chicago. The first integrated hospital in the United States was founded in Chicago by Daniel Hale Williams. Integrated is the very opposite of segregated. Integrated meant that black doctors and black nurses and white doctors and white nurses and all their staff could work underneath the same roof for the same cause, and that is to help patients. He created the first integrated hospital in the United States, in Chicago. This is James Cornish. In 1893, James Cornish was involved in a bar fight where he was stabbed in his heart. Okay, he was submitted to Providence Hospital, where Daniel Hale Williams opened up Cornish's heart, his chest and heart, did his surgery, and then patched him back up. Now, mind you, the technology back then wasn't nearly as advanced as it is now. So his utensils were very less effective, but he still got the job done. This is Freedman's Hospital. This is what it looks like now at Howard University. Daniel Hale Williams was submitted and elected as the chief of staff at Freedman's Hospital. Freedman's Hospital was also only for freed slaves that have been freed from slavery. It was only for them. Okay, that's why it's called Freedman's Hospital. Howard University in Washington, D.C. The National Medical Association was also founded by Daniel Hale Williams. National Medical Association. Daniel Hale Williams took it upon himself to establish his own organization, because the original organization that was called American Medical Association, the AMA, was segregated. They only allowed whites to be a part of it. So Daniel Hill Williams established his own, to where only black nurses and doctors could be a part of it. And that was founded in 1895. Daniel Hill Williams was so skillful in the field of medicine, he was submitted to the American College of Surgeons in 1913. It's a very prestigious group of white and black doctors and nurses. Daniel Hill Williams passed away in 1931 in his mid-60s in Idlewild, Michigan, due to complications of tuberculosis. Okay? This is Frederick Douglass Pollard. And no, this is not Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist. This is Frederick Douglass Pollard. He is the first African-American professional football player and the first African-American professional football coach. And he played and coached for Akron. A lot of people don't know that either. Akron used to have a professional football team back in the 1920s. Okay? Frederick Douglass Pollard stood about 5'7", and he weighed around 175, 180 pounds. He was very short. He was small for his stature, especially for a professional football player. But he was very swift, very quick. He was able to maneuver through his components easily. And he was one of the best in the country, by the way, at that time. He got his degree from Brown University in Rhode Island. And we all know Rhode Island is the smallest state in the country. He got his degree from Brown University in Rhode Island. So these are the teams that Pollard played for. And this is a rundown. 1920 to 1921. He played for the Akron Professionals. That was their name, Akron Professionals, the Akron Pros. In 1920, he played for the Union Club of Phoenixville. 1922, he played for the Milwaukee Badgers. 1923 to 1924, he played for the Gilberton Catamounts. 1923 to 1925, he played for the Hammond Pros. 1925, he played for the Akron Indians. Yeah, they changed their name to the Akron Indians. And that's where the Cleveland Indians borrowed their mascot initially from the Akron Indians, which was a football team. And the Cleveland Indians is now a baseball team. 1925, Providence Steamroller. In 1926, he played again. He came back to Akron and played for the Akron Indians. 1928, he played for the Chicago Black Hawks. Now, the Chicago Black Hawks was a team that he established himself for very high-risk African-American boys in Chicago that were getting into trouble. He established that himself in 1928. And this is a list of the teams that Frederick Douglass Pollard coached for. In 1921, he coached for Akron. Very first African-American professional football coach. And he coached for Akron. 1925, he coached for the Hammond Pros. And then again, in 1928, the one that he established himself, he coached for the Chicago Blackhawks, which was a group of all high-risk African-American boys in Chicago. A lot of people have never heard of Buddy Bolden. Buddy Bolden is a very early pioneer and innovator of jazz music. He was a trumpet player. Grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, and he started playing the trumpet at a very early age. And later on in life, he ended up developing schizophrenia, and that's what he died of in the early 19-teens. But Buddy Bolden doesn't get a whole lot of credit either for his contribution to jazz music. A lot of people have never heard of Moses Fleetwood Walker. Moses Fleetwood Walker is technically the first African-American professional baseball player. It was not Jackie Robinson. A lot of people think it was Jackie Robinson. It was not Jackie Robinson. It was Moses Fleetwood Walker. Jackie Robinson is the first African-American professional baseball player in the modern era. Okay, I need to put that in there, in the modern era. But overall, he was not the first. It was Moses Fleetwood Walker. In 1884, he was drafted to the Toledo Blue Stockings, right here in Toledo, Ohio, just 2.5 hours away. That's how he got his start in his debut. He played for another 5 years, and he was disbanded from the league in 1889, okay? So from 1884 to 1889, he played Major League Baseball, which at the time, it wasn't called Major League Baseball. It was called the American Association, which was a major league, okay? It was a major league. So from 1884 to 1947, at the time Jackie Robinson was drafted to the Brooklyn Dodgers, that was 63 years. A whole 63 years had passed until they allowed blacks back into professional baseball. That's a long time, okay? Later on in life, once he was disbanded from the league, he went on to write books. He became an author. He also took a lot of interest in black nationalism. Okay, we all hear about socialism, imperialism, capitalism, communism, Marxism, but there was nationalism as well. Nationalism was a system to where mostly African-American men, okay, believed that their nationality or their movement was more superior than another nationality or other nationalities. They feel more dominant, more superior. Okay, so he was a big follower of Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey created the Universal Negro Improvement Association in the late 1800s. And a big follower of him was Elijah Muhammad. And I'm sure we've all heard of Elijah Muhammad. He was the leader of the Nation of Islam, and he also taught Malcolm X everything he needed to know. Okay, so he took part, big supporter within the black nationalism movement in the late 1800s. In 1891, Moses Fleetwood Walker became a part of the Syracuse Stars. Okay? And that's Moses Fleetwood Walker in the back, far left. The back row, far left. That's Moses Fleetwood Walker. And he became a part of that group, that team. And he was very successful. He was one of the best on the team. And unfortunately, going to Syracuse, one day he was walking on the campus and a group of all white men, it was about 5 of them, they approached Moses Fleetwood and they called out his name. And he said, "Walker, you know, what are you doing here? Nigga, what are you doing here?" And they said, "Get him." They yelled it out, "Get him." And so all 5 men approached him and they jumped him. They attacked him. And luckily for Moses Fleetwood Walker, he did have something on him to defend himself. They didn't know it, but he pulled out a knife out of his pocket and he stabbed one of the white guys right in his groin. In his groin. It was a severe wound to the point where he died. He passed away. And so he was put on trial. In 1893, he was put on trial, and luckily for him, just interestingly, he was acquitted by an all-white jury. Now that never happens. This was in 1893, acquitted by all-white jury, all-white male jury at that, acquitted from all charges. So he was let go. And so later on, he ended up dying of cancer, and he's to this very day one of our unsung pioneers and innovators within our African American history. Not a lot of people know about him. James Weldon Johnson. James Weldon Johnson. A lot of people never heard about him either. James Weldon Johnson is actually the creator of the Black National Anthem. A lot of people don't know that we have a Black National Anthem either. We all know of the National Anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, but what about the Black National Anthem, called Lift Every Voice and Sing? So him and his brother, Rosman Johnson, younger brother, Rosman Johnson, they put their heads together and they ended up writing a whole lot of songs, more than 100 songs. And one of their most famous songs, believe it or not, which, again, a whole lot of people are not even aware of, is the National Anthem for African Americans. Lift every voice and sing. And what about Jan Matzliger? Jan Matzliger. A lot of people don't know about him either. He's another unsung pioneer. Jan Matzliger gets a lot of credit for development of the shoes that we wear to this very day. A lot of people don't know that. Before he came about, Jan Matzliger was born in Suriname. He was a Surinamese. That's a country in South America, northern South America, okay? And he moved over to the United States, Massachusetts to be exact, around the 1880s, okay? Before he came about, shoemakers and shoe manufacturers were really trying to figure out how to take a shoe, the top of a shoe, and connect it to the sole. It just wouldn't connect, it wouldn't attach, and it wouldn't stay. Plus also, at that time, a lot of the shoe machines that they were using back then could only develop up to about 70 pairs of shoes per day. Jan Matzliger came about. He developed a shoe machine that went from 70 pairs of shoes a day to 700 with his creation. So he's definitely a pioneer within the shoemaking industry. And a lot of people don't know about this man. African American male. We give a lot of credit to him. Okay? So Jan Matzliger, try to remember that name. Jan Matzliger. I don't know what happened here. Okay, we're going to move on here to our next one. Charles Tinley. A lot of people don't know about Charles Tinley either. We give him a lot of credit for creating mainstream gospel music. Okay? We all hear about Thomas Dorsey, Clara Ward. A lot of people don't know about Clara Ward, Tampa Red, Albertina Walker, Dorothy Norwood, Kirk Franklin, a lot of the modern day singers, Mary. But it all gets its start from Charles Tinley. Mainstream gospel music. Mainstream gospel music in the 1870s, Charles Tinley. He created this song called I Shall Overcome Someday, which later on became the anthem for the civil rights movement called We Shall Overcome. He actually wrote that song. And he was also a minister and a pastor of an AME church. And, a lot of people don't give him credit for that. And a lot of people don't know about him either. So Charles Tinley. Hattie McDaniel. A lot of people have heard of Hattie McDaniel. She's actually the first African American to earn an Academy Award or Oscar Award. And she received that Academy Award as her role as a mammy in Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind came out in 1939. She received that award for Best Supporting Actress. Okay? So that picture off to the left, the top left, that's her receiving her Oscar, and the picture, the color picture, the bottom right, is McDaniel in Gone with the Wind. Bessie Coleman. A lot of people don't know about Bessie Coleman either. Bessie Coleman is the first African-American female to earn her pilot license, and the first African-American female to earn her international pilot license, and the first female in general to earn her international pilot license. That's amazing. She got her degree and her training, education, over in France. Not the United States, but in France. She did try to earn her degree and her education right here in America, but they didn't allow African American women to earn their degrees or training or education in her field right here in America. So she got her training in France. This is a picture of Bessie Coleman in 1922. Now, she took a lot of interest in exhibition flights, air shows, okay, which include stunts, tricks in the air. One particular day in April of 1926, her and her flying agent, William Wills, were taken to fly, okay? So they were more than 2,000 feet in the air. Now, before that even occurred, she was supposed to be getting a flight plane from Texas, which is where she was from. They were going to be transporting the plane from Texas to Florida, which is where she was. Her family members had told her, do not fly this particular plane because it had malfunctioned too many times. They told her not to fly the plane. Don't get on this plane at all. She completely disregarded what they told her. So her and her agent ended up getting the plane, and they took a ride at more than 2,000 feet up in the air in April of 1926. They were getting prepared for an air show. And so what happened was, within about 5 minutes of them being in the air, and by the way, Bessie Coleman was not buckled in. She was looking over the cockpit to study the land and the terrain below. Within 5 minutes, there was a wrench underneath the plane that had slid out of position and jammed the gearbox of the plane, causing the whole plane to spiral out of control, doing a tailspin. I mean, it was moving quickly. In less than 60 seconds, Bessie Coleman was thrown from the plane at more than 2,000 feet in the air with nothing to catch her fall. Can you imagine the impact of her body hitting the ground at 2,000 feet? No parachute, no nothing. She died instantly. Her agent, William Wills, I'll say about 2 minutes later, was still in the plane. The whole plane plummeted to the ground, bursted in the flames, and he died instantly as well. So it was a very, very sad, tragic end to a very prosperous, skillful, intelligent African-American female who made history twice. First African-American female to earn her pilot license, and the first female in general to earn her international pilot license. Amazing. This is another unsung pioneer within our history. Booker Wright. A lot of people have never heard of Booker Wright. Never, ever heard of this man. He grew up in Greenwood, Mississippi, which is considered the Delta South. Very segregated area or city in Mississippi. Okay, the Delta South. Greenwood, Mississippi. Okay? Booker Wright grew up in Greenwood, Mississippi. And what he was he was an all-black employee. He was an all-black waiter in an all-white restaurant called Lusco's. This is a picture of Lusco's restaurant at that particular time. We're talking 1955 when he first started working there. as a 14-year-old black boy. He was the only black employee at this restaurant, okay? And a very interesting part about this is he was ordered by his white staff to recite the whole menu by mouth to every customer that walked through the doors of Lusco's, which is very unheard of. You know how at restaurants nowadays, even back then, restaurants always had manual menus to look at. You turn the page, you look at the menu, the price of the menu, maybe even the ingredients. But at this particular restaurant, he had to recite the whole menu by mouth for every customer that walked through the doors. So if somebody walked in, he had to recite the whole menu for them. If 5 minutes later somebody else walked in, he had to recite the whole menu for them by mouth. And if he messed up, he was in big trouble for it. Okay? Now with all that said, of course he was called out his name, he was being taunted, scrutinized, chastised. He was being called John, he was being called nigger, he was being called Jim, he was being called Booker. I mean, every name in the book, he was being called. And despite all of that, he still maintained a smile on his face. Even though he was hurting inside, he had emotional pain, he was still able to maintain a smile every day, all day, in front of every white customer that walked through those doors. That's amazing. Later on, they were doing a documentary that came out in 1966 by NBC. NBC was doing a documentary on the Delta South, and there was a producer by the name of Frank DiFalita. Frank DiFalita, a producer at NBC, he wanted to do a documentary. So he just happened to choose Greenwood, Mississippi, and he stopped by Lusco's restaurant where Booker Wright was working. He stopped in there and he interviewed Booker Wright. And Booker Wright vented out in this documentary on camera. And he let everybody know his true feelings and emotions about the South and how he was being treated. The documentary aired on NBC in 1966 on television nationally. That caused an immediate outrage across the country and definitely in Greenwood, Mississippi. So what happened was Booker Wright was being taunted and scrutinized so badly till he resigned himself from Lusco's. He created and established his own restaurant called Booker's Place, also located in Greenwood, Mississippi. Okay? A little while after that, his restaurant, Booker's Place, was firebombed by a white mob. So his whole restaurant blew up in flames. It was demolished, destroyed. He was so strong-willed till he developed it and established it and created it all over again. And he reopened his restaurant. Unfortunately, in 1973, while he was in his restaurant doing his service, an African-American male walked in his restaurant with a rifle and shot Booker Wright dead, right in his own restaurant. So it's a very tragic end. I think this is a good example of a story of triumph and tragedy. He was very hardworking to develop and establish his own restaurant in a very segregated city in the United States. And after it being firebombed, he still reestablished it all over again. And then unfortunately, he was shot and killed by one of his own people in his own restaurant. So try to remember that name, Booker Wright. Claudette Colvin. A lot of people don't know about her either. Claudette Colvin is the first Rosa Parks. She should have more recognition than that. She is the first Rosa Parks. But why people don't hear about her is unfortunate. Everybody's heard about Rosa Parks, but very few people have heard about this woman, Claudette Colvin. At 15 years old, and this is a picture of her at 12, But at 15 years old, March 2nd, 1955, the same exact bus stop that Rosa Parks boarded and refused to give up her seat, Claudette Colvin refused to give up her seat as well at 15, along with 3 other black females. She was the youngest out of the 4. Okay, the others were actually grown women. She was the only child. Okay? They could not make a case out of her for 2 reasons. Number 1, she was just too young. She was a teenager. Number 2, she was pregnant also, unfortunately, at 15. She knew Rosa Parks because they were both part of the NAACP program. Rosa Parks was the secretary of the NAACP. Claudette Colvin was part of the junior NAACP. Okay? E.D. Nixon, Edgar Nixon, was the leader and president of the MIA, Montgomery Improvement Association. E.D. Nixon. And we have to give a lot of credit to him too. He's another unsung pioneer within history. But E.D. Nixon tried his best to make a case for Claudette Colvin, but he just could not. He couldn't. Browder versus Gale, May 11, 1956. Browder was the last name of the oldest African-American female that boarded that bus along with Claudette Colvin. She was the oldest of them. And that's why they made the case in her name, Browder. Aurelia Browder was her whole name. Aurelia Browder. Versus Gale. Gale was the last name of the mayor of Montgomery, Alabama. He was the mayor of Montgomery, William Gale. So Browder versus Gale was the case. December 20th, 1956 is when the boycott ended with bus segregation. And as you can see in this photo, you have to the right Dr. King. Right in the middle is his very close friend and associate, Ralph Abernathy. And then off to the left is Dr. King's wife, Coretta Scott King. Claudette Colvin is in her mid-70s now, 75, 76 years old, and she resides in Brooklyn, New York. She worked in a nursing home for more than 30 years, had 2 sons. One of them passed away due to drugs in the 1990s. And so she's still living to this very day. I just wish more people would know who she is. Daisy Bates. Daisy Bates is another unsung pioneer within our history. Daisy Bates, she helped out the Little Rock Nine. She was their mentor. Daisy Bates, Little Rock, Arkansas. She was also the head of the NAACP chapter of the whole state of Arkansas and the city of Little Rock. This is a picture of the Little Rock Nine. Okay, so from left to right, I'm going to just go right through these. Thelma Mothershed, Elizabeth Eckford, Gloria Ray, Jefferson Thomas, Melba Patillo, Ernest Green, Carlotta Walls, Minnie Jean Brown, and Terrence Roberts. Those are all 9 of them. And of course, at the bottom right is Daisy Bates. I'm sure a lot of us have heard about Emmett Till. Very unfortunate, tragic death of Emmett Till. But Emmett Till was actually diseased. A lot of people didn't know that either. He had polio. He was very large for his age. He was 14 years old, and he was from Chicago. And he had traveled to Money, Mississippi to visit his great uncle, Mose Wright. Mose Wright, M-O-S-E, Mose Wright. And he was a very strong-willed 14-year-old black boy, by the way. And so what happened was, in August 20th, to be exact, 1955, he was on his way to Money, Mississippi by train, which was a 14 to 16-hour train ride. His mother, Mamie Till, had a very strict conversation with him before he went down there. And she told him, when you go down to Money, Mississippi, if you walk past a white person, a Caucasian, you look at the ground. You don't make eye contact whatsoever. And whatever you do, don't flirt with anybody. Don't flirt with any white girls. No white females. Before he left, she gave him a souvenir that actually belonged to Emmett Till's father, who had served in the war. She gave him Emmett Till's father's ring, which had the initials LT on it, that stood for Louis Till, which was the name of his father. She gave him the ring, he put it on, and he was on his way to Money, Mississippi. About a 16-hour ride altogether, at the most, all the way down there. So he arrived August 21st. He arrived August 21st in Money, Mississippi. 3 days later, August 24th, Emmett Till and a few of his cousins that were already living there, and some neighborhood boys, and a girl actually, wanted to stop by a convenient grocery store called Bryant's Grocery and Meat Market. This is it right here in 1955. That's what it looked like. Bryant's Grocery and Meat Market. There were 7 boys and 1 girl altogether. There were 8 of them. 7 boys and 1 girl, between the ages of 13 and 18. Emmett Till was 14. Okay? They stopped by this store. They were kind of just hanging out in the front, in the porch there. And they were all going in one by one. They didn't go in together. They all went in one by one. Emmett Till was the last to go in. So as they're sitting out on the porch, one of his cousins dared him to go into the store and flirt with the white woman behind the counter, who was 21-year-old Carolyn Bryant. They dared him to do it, which, by the way, Emmett Till had taken his wallet out of his pocket and was kind of bragging to the boys. You know, this is my white girlfriend back in Chicago. And it really wasn't his girlfriend. It was just a pre-picture that was in his wallet of a random little white girl. And he was showing the boys, bragging to them, this is my girlfriend back in Chicago. So they said, okay, wow, so you're good with the girls, huh? They dared him to go inside and flirt with Carolyn Bryant. So he goes inside to buy a pack of gum. And while he's in there, he approaches Carolyn Bryant at the counter and grabs her hand and says, hey, baby, would you like to go out on a date with me? And she immediately stormed out of the store. She stormed out. She got from behind the counter, ran out, and was actually going towards her truck to retrieve her pistol. Okay? Once that happened, Emmett Till then ran out of the store, gathered up all the boys. They got inside of their car, and they drove off quickly before Carolyn Bryant can get her gun. So, this is what it looks like now in 2015. So I'm going to go back. This is what Bryant's Grocery looked like in 1955. That's what it looks like now. As you can see the difference. It's been dilapidated. The ceiling has caved in. The side of it, most of it is gone. But it's still a landmark that's still there in Money, Mississippi, as a landmark to represent the start of the end of Emmett Till's death, unfortunately. But getting back to Emmett Till, her husband, Roy Bryant, who is the founder of the store, was out of town in Texas, along with his half-brother, J.W. Milam. They were gone in Texas at the time when this happened. They came back into town, and what happened was one of the neighborhood boys went inside of the store to inform Roy Bryant of what had happened on August 24th. So on August 28th, early morning of August 28th, this is 4 days later, 2 o'clock in the morning, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam knock on the door of Emmett Till's great uncle's house, Mo's Right. They knock on the door. They let him in. They go inside one of the rooms where Emmett Till is, and they say, "Are you the boy that whistled at the white woman a few days ago?" And he says, "Yes." Okay? So J.W. Milam, which is Roy Bryant's half-brother, says to Emmett Till, "I want you to gather all your stuff, put your clothes on, your shoes on, and let's get out of here. You're coming with us." And so Emmett Till then proceeds to put his socks and shoes on, and J.W. Milam says, "No, don't put your socks on. Forget about your socks. Just put your shoes on. Let's go." So then they threatened Mo's Right, his great uncle. They threatened him and said, "If you say anything about what we're doing, you won't live to see your next birthday." And he asked him how old he was. He was 64. "If you say anything, you won't live to see your 65th birthday." So they left out and they threw Emmett Till in the back of their pickup truck. And they drove off. They drove for about 3 hours until they came up around a barn or a shed. Okay? They took Emmett Till from out of the back of the pickup truck and they took him to the shed to where J.W. Milam pistol whipped Emmett Till severely. I'm talking for about 3 minutes. Pistol whipped him with his pistol. After he was done, he then handed the gun over to Roy Bryant, and then Roy Bryant then pistol whipped him as well. So they took turns. Amazingly, Emmett Till did not bleed. He just bruised a little bit. He was very strong-willed, had very tough skin for a 14-year-old boy. And he was not scared of neither one of them at all. J.W. Milam then asked Emmett Till, "So, do you think you're better than I am? Do you think you're as good as I am?" Emmett Till replied, "Yes, I do." So then he begins to beat him again. After they were done, there was a cotton gin that was in the barn. A cotton gin. They ordered Emmett Till to pick up this heavy cotton gin, which was used to develop cotton, and put it in the back of the pickup truck. They drove off, and they drove for another hour and a half until they came across the Tallahatchie River. They got Emmett Till from out of the pickup truck. He had to carry this heavy cotton gin off the truck, carry it by the river, lay it on the ground. J.W. Milam then proceeds and says, "I want you to take off all your clothes." So Emmett Till standing there completely nude. They wanted him to take all his clothes off. J.W. Milam then says, "Are you still as good as I am?" Emmett Till replied, "Yes, I am." J.W. Milam then said, "Have you still had white girls?" Emmett Till replied, "Yes, I have." At that moment, J.W. Milam took his pistol and pointed it to Emmett Till's right ear and pulled the trigger. At that moment, they then took the cotton gin and tied a barbed wire, very sharp barbed wire, around the cotton gin, and then tied the other end of the barbed wire around Emmett Till's neck and threw his body in the Tallahatchie River. 3 days later, August 31st, that was just 3 days later, a young white boy and his father was fishing. They were fishing in the river, and he saw this body just afloat on top of the water. So they went by this body, and they realized it was a body of a black boy. And come to find out it was the body of Emmett Till. And the only way they were able to identify this body was by the ring that he had on his finger. The ring that had belonged to his father, Louis Till, that had LT on it. That was the only way they were able to identify the body, was by that ring. And this is just a photo of Emmett Till's decomposed body during his funeral. Later on, in Look magazine, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam both confessed to killing him. They both confessed to it, which, by the way, they had been acquitted too. They were let off the hook. And later on, they confessed to killing him in a magazine, a national magazine. So off to the left, that's 21-year-old Carolyn Bryant. She was 21 years old in that photo. The photo in the middle, that's Roy Bryant. He was a creator and established Bryant's grocery store. And then the far right, that's his half-brother, J.W. Bynum. Charles Drew, he's another unsung pioneer in African American history. Charles Drew, we have to give him a lot of credit to where medicine is to this very day. More specifically, with blood transfusions. He developed and improved the storage of blood and plasma, and also the improvement with blood transfusions. And there have been thousands of people all around this country and abroad, all over the world, who have been in need of blood transfusions because they were at loss of blood. And we have to give him a lot of credit for that. During World War II, he established the blood bank. Okay, the Red Cross blood bank. Okay, he also established tents and campaigns for prisoners during World War II who were injured and lost a lot of blood. And so, also in the United States, he was made chief of staff at Freedman's Hospital. And we had talked about that earlier with Daniel Hale Williams. Charles Drew was also made chief of staff at Freedman's Hospital in Washington, D.C. So try to remember that name, Charles Drew. Shirley Chisholm, also another unsung pioneer within our history. She's the first African American female to be elected to Congress. That was in 1968. First African American female to be elected to Congress. She was a Democrat from Brooklyn, New York. 4 years later, 1972, she became the first female, period, to be nominated as candidate for President of the United States. The first female, period, to be nominated as a candidate for President of the United States in 1972. Nathaniel Sweetwater Clifton. Nathaniel Sweetwater Clifton. He is the first African American professional basketball player. First African American professional basketball player. And that was in 1950. He initially got his start with the Harlem Globetrotters. That was founded by Abe Saperstein. Abe Saperstein, he was a promoter. And he got his start with the Harlem Globetrotters. And 5 years later, in 1950, Nathaniel Sweetwater Clifton was drafted to the New York Knickerbockers. At that time, they were called New York Knickerbockers. Now called New York Knicks. Okay? Now, Nathaniel Sweetwater Clifton initially was born Clifton Nathaniel. He was born Clifton Nathaniel. He had his name switched because during games on the scoreboard, okay, his last name was so long he couldn't fit the whole thing. So he switched his names around to Nathaniel Clifton from Clifton Nathaniel. And he was given the nickname Sweetwater because everybody who knew him as loving soda pop. He was good for drinking soda pop. And so they gave him the nickname Sweetwater. So try to remember Nathaniel Sweetwater Clifton, first African American professional basketball player. And he played for New York Knickerbockers. Henrietta Lacks. A lot of people don't know about her either. Henrietta Lacks is the base and foundation of the very first known immortal cell line. The very first known immortal cell line. Okay, she was born in 1920 and she died in 1951. She was only 31 years old. Born in 1920, died in 1951 at the age of 31. Okay? In her 20s, she ended up marrying her first cousin, David Lax. This is them right here. She married her first cousin, David Lax. They ended up having 5 kids together, by the way, too, which is amazing. They had 5 kids together. And so, in the early 1940s, she started developing tumors, mostly within the abdomen. About 8 years later, she had tumors growing all over her body, from head to toe. Literally, from head to toe. Tumors growing everywhere. And the doctors tried to figure out, surgeons tried to figure out what was going on. They couldn't figure out what was going on with her. She had tumors growing all over her body. Okay? Her surgeon, Dr. George Gay, G-E-Y, Dr. George Otto Gay, at one time was doing surgery on her, and without her permission, he took some of her cells and stored them. Okay? After she passed away in 1951 of cervical cancer, her cells that had been stored were still alive. Now, she was gone. She was dead. But her cells were still living. And they're still living to this very day. Now, keep in mind, this was back in 1951. Her cells are still reproducing. Now, in 2015, they're still reproducing. And it's been the base of several thousands of experiments and projects within the science and medical industry. Not just in America, but all around the world. Her cells are still alive. Her cells have been the product and development of vitro fertilization. It's been the product of gene mapping. It's even been the product of cloning. Okay? So she has been the base of the first known immortal cell line. In other words, her body is dead, and it's been dead for years, but her cells are still reproducing, even now, in 2015. That's amazing. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks was written by author Rebecca Skloot. That's a picture of her, Rebecca Skloot. She's a white female and author. And I've read the book. It's a great book. It's about 300 pages. I've read the whole thing. Another suggested read. Great book. And Rebecca Skloot did a lot of traveling just to build a lot of information and research on Henrietta Lacks and her life and legacy. She actually came one-on-one with a lot of Henrietta Lacks's relatives, one-on-one conversations with them. And she wrote this amazing book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. So this is just a rundown. I'm going to be very brief with these next African Americans in history. This is a rundown. So Scott Joplin, innovator and pioneer of African American history, but mostly jazz, everybody, jazz, and classical combined. He was considered the king of ragtime music. This was in the 1870s. The king of ragtime music, which was a combination of classical and jazz combined. Early jazz. This was before Dixieland. This was before bebop. This was before swing, big band, all of those. There was ragtime music. This is Mary Fields, first African American stagecoach or mail carrier in the United States. The first African American stagecoach and mail carrier in the United States. She was hired to work for the United States Postal Service, the post office. She's the first black to work for the post office. And she was very tough, too. One incident came about where there were a group of white guys, there were about 3 of them, they had approached her. And They called her out her name, and they even attacked her. And she hurried up and pulled out her rifle. As you can see in this photo, she's holding a rifle. She was good for carrying rifles, and she would always wear dark colored clothing, also as you can see in this photo as well. So try to remember that name, Mary Fields, first African American stagecoach and mail carrier in the United States. Edmonia Lewis, another unsung pioneer and innovator. She was a professional sculptor. She created sculptures of famous people. And back during that time, again, just like Bessie Coleman didn't get her education and training in pilotry and aviation, when Edmonia Lewis got her education in Rome, she did not get her education here in the United States because they did not allow African American women to get their education in the field of arts. This was in the 1850s. They didn't allow that, not in the arts. So she got her education in Rome, Italy. Leontine Price, another unsung pioneer. She's known as being the first African American to sing in the Metropolitan Opera. And she gained national and international fame in opera music. Elijah McCoy is another unsung pioneer. He gets credited for developing lubricators for steam engines, mostly for ships and trains, locomotives, okay? He also invented the lawn sprinkler. A lot of us use lawn sprinklers for our lawns and backyards to sprinkle the grass or our plants. He invented the lawn sprinkler. He also invented the folding iron board. A lot of us use folding iron boards for our clothes. He invented that as well. And a lot of us have heard the phrase, the real McCoy, which means authenticity or to be authentic. The real McCoy. That's where that phrase comes from. This man here, Elijah McCoy. He has over 50 patents in the manufacturing engineering industry, mostly lubricators. Granville Woods, another unsung pioneer. People don't talk about him either. He's an engineer, or was an engineer. He was an engineer who created telegraph devices for trains, locomotives. He created this one device where you can transport and communicate from the train station to the actual train or conductor on the train. That was his most famous device that he invented or created, a telegraph to communicate from the train station to the train itself. Jane Boland, another unsung pioneer. Jane Boland was the first African American female judge in the United States. First African American female judge. And she was a judge in New York. She's also the first African American female to graduate from Yale Law School. Ralph Bunche, another unsung pioneer. First African American to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. That was in 1950. First African American to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the second, and he received it in 1964. But Ralph Bunche was the very first in 1950. Bayard Rustin. A lot of people don't know about him either. He was a very close friend and associate of Dr. King. A lot of people think that Dr. King was the organizer of the whole March on Washington in 1963, where he gave the I Have a Dream speech. It was not Dr. King. It was Bayard Rustin. A lot of people didn't want Dr. King to be around Bayard Rustin because Bayard Rustin was an openly homosexual man. He was openly gay. And they resented Dr. King for that. A lot of people resented Dr. King for that. They didn't want him hanging around Bayard Rustin. But Bayard Rustin, believe it or not, was a huge organizer within the civil rights movement. And we have to give him a lot of credit for organizing the March on Washington. A lot of people don't know that. So remember that name, Bayard Rustin. Alice Coachman. Alice Coachman, first African-American female to earn any type of medal during an Olympic Games. First African-American female to earn any type of medal during an Olympic Games. And she earned it in London, England in 1948. 1948. 12 years after Jesse Owens, we've all heard of Jesse Owens, he received 4 gold medals in 1936 in Berlin, Germany, in the face of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi army. This was 12 years later when Alice Coachman became the first African-American female to earn any type of medal during an Olympic Games. Asa Philip Randolph, or A. Philip Randolph. He's credited for organizing the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which was a civil rights organization, socialist organization, and labor organization. He was a big part in the labor movement and socialist party, the socialist movement. A. Philip Randolph, so try to remember him. He was also a very close associate of Dr. King. He was one of the big 6, along with Dr. King, John Lewis, Whitney Young, and a few others. So A. Philip Randolph. Marcus Garvey, as I had mentioned to you guys before, earlier in the lecture with Moses Fleetwood Walker, Marcus Garvey created the largest black nationalist movement ever in history. He organized and established the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and he was from Jamaica. He was a Jamaican and immigrated to the United States to establish this movement, and later on he was deported back to Jamaica. And a lot of people have supported him. A lot of people have followed Marcus Garvey. As a matter of fact, Marcus Garvey altogether had more than 6 million followers. 6 million followers within the black nationalist movement. Rita Dove. Rita Dove, a lot of people don't know about her either. She's from Akron, Ohio. From Akron, graduated from Bootle, and she became a poet laureate. A poet laureate. Laureate. Laureate, poet laureate, which is someone who creates and organizes literary events around the country. She was appointed by President Bill Clinton in the 90s to be his poet laureate. So remember Rita Dove, she's right here from Akron. Ruby Nash Garnett. Ruby Nash Garnett. She was part of the famous group from Akron as well, called Ruby and the Romantics. Ruby and the Romantics. It was a group of 5 people, 5 singers. She was the only female, and she was the leading singer of the group. They got their start right here in Akron, Ohio at Central High School, and then they got their start with Decca Records in New York. And they shared the stage with very famous singers, well-known groups, like the Jackson 5, the Temptations, Stevie Wonder, several more. But Ruby Nash Garnett, leading singer of Ruby and the Romantics, in 1963, they had the hit song, Our Day Will Come. It hit #1 on the Billboard in 1963, called Our Day Will Come. And they were from Akron. Lawrence Wilder, another unsung pioneer. He became the first African American governor in the United States. First African American governor in the United States. He became the governor of Virginia in 1990. 1990, first African American governor in the U.S. John H. Johnson. John Johnson was an entrepreneur, author. He established the Jet and Ebony magazines. Okay? Jet and Ebony magazines in the 1940s. And before we end the lecture, this is a book that I've written called The Chosen Ones, Perception of Malcolm and Martin. It's about Dr. King and Malcolm X, and I'm giving a motivational, educational, and logical standpoint within the book. You can order the book on Amazon.com, DornsBookstore.com, Textbooks.com, Tower.com, and Google Books. If you have a Droid, you can also purchase it on the Google Play Store, and that's The Chosen One's Perception of Malcolm Martin by myself, Gabriel A. Scott. So did everybody learn something today?
Yeah, good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good job.
So you know about that Central Liberty? That was interesting.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Sure.
I never knew that there's like a chain there. Or not,
Yeah. Yeah.
You never got that, never can get that close.
Right.
But yeah, that was very interesting. Yeah, that was very interesting, that Statue of Liberty. Yeah.
I never knew that.
I've been to the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, I have too,
It's
yeah.
about
Yeah.
anything that's behind it.
Yeah.
It's there.
We have some good history.
Hey,
Yeah,
why don't you be a professor?
that's some good history.
No, I'm serious.
I know you told me that before. I just,
Well, like any history, professor in like high school or
Yeah, because you like history.
I like when I'm doing that. I just want to go inside like schools and colleges and give lectures, Yeah. As far as,
Oh, okay.
taking as far as getting my doctorate.
Okay. Should I go online? You can. I'll find out if you need one. Yeah, I think I might should be online. Yeah, so like it's
I appreciate you coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope
Great.
you learned something.
I did. I learned a lot.
Good, thank
More
you.
than I ever learned in history class.
wow.
So
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
great. Thank you guys.
No problem.
That's what I told Gabe. I said, I went here for education, and when he started teaching at the Boys and Girls Club, I've learned more from him than my professor here.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Gabe, he reads a lot and he has a sharp memory as far as remembering stuff. That's the
everything years.
that's the part that's amazing is remembering it all, because you can read a lot of material, but how much of it can you actually retain and repeat? It's not easy to do.
Yeah, that's what you should be a professor.
Yeah, he should have went into he likes history. He should have been a history teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be a professor.
You think so?
I know so.
Professor?
Yeah. Now our kids, you should put our kids like, you used to teach them this, but not this.
Right.
Totally different.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, we can, bring them like as in the University of Akron,
Right.
Yeah.
an experience of a college
Right.
scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah, college atmosphere.
Yeah.
A lot of them never been on a college campus
Right.
before.
Yeah, like to them.
Yeah, that would be good.
I think so too. Maybe you should ask them that, just like, so they can have like the experiences in college. And
Yeah.
what a college classroom looks like.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I'm thinking about that.
You should.
Yeah.
And that's why, Black History Month. Maybe we should do that every year.
Yep.
And
the students and their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the toughest things coming on the campus is just knowing sometime where to park. You know, as a visitor.
Where did you park?
In front. By yours.
Okay. By my car?
Oh, okay.
I waited for somebody because it's full.
Oh, it was full.
I
Okay.
waited for somebody to
Move out, huh? Yeah, I'm parked over that way.
Oh, by
Not too far from
the bookstore.
yeah. It's really not too far from E.J. Thomas Performing Arts, but it's on the same street that you go down to get to the Performing Arts School.
Yeah.
There's a couple parking lots over
They're
there.
not here. Your sister. I was looking forward to see you right today. It's so funny.
Yeah, she's probably with Cordell. She probably didn't want to bring him maybe up on campus.
Aww.
Maybe. That's probably why.
But a lot of our kids at the Boys and Girls Club always talk about U.S. lecture, like they learn, because they don't really teach that in high school.
Right, that's true.
I told my sister about the guy, the first professor at Howard. His name was John Mercer.
I heard John Mercer.
At Langston Hughes, that's his uncle.
Did you talk to any professors here?
Any Professor Sears? I've been in contact with her.
Yeah.
She wasn't able to make it today. Yeah, I've been in contact with her. Amy Drucy. Amy Drucy, she's a professor here.
Like professors here can get their own books for their kids. Your book is allowed with her own kids.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And get like a research or extra credit of your book.
Right. I might be get in contact with her.
Yeah.
Ask her some questions. I want to make it to Kent State. I
Oh,
want to make it to Kent State
ask
too.
Denzel.
Talked to him a couple weeks ago.
You should. I mean, he knows a lot of people there.
Cleveland State.
Yeah.
A lot of colleges around
Yeah. Even high
here.
school.
Yeah, high schools too. Yep. I spoke at Firestone Park and Venice Park last school year, right at the end of last school year, man.
Yeah, the kids all do.
Yeah, but I'll be speaking at more.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Because I think you should be a professor.
I appreciate it.
No, I'm serious.
I appreciate that.
I can't even like all those years. I'm like, what?
Yeah, they got different programs for people, I could be a professor, no education. You got something.
Or even like a graduate students.
Yeah.
Right.
They'll work with your hours,
Work with your hours.
and then they continue in college. But all you can teach is like at the end of the day, like at night.
Another program is downtown.
That's on Main Street, I guess, or High Street, whichever way you come
It's
through there.
close to the station.
That's part. It used to be actual department store. Now it's part of Akron.
Are you over there quite often?
I'm taking my graduate school.
Another is upward bound for the balance convention. I used to work there too. Miss Baker we always needs instructors.
Yeah.
So they got grants where they can hire people to do that.
Yeah.
They're right there on Hawthorne, right now it's a convention. But they have programs where the kids have to go and listen. They have to go.
You have to. It's mandatory.
Yeah, that's the one that you want to target too, like mandatory. Just like professors, like they need.
What was this again?
Urban ounce prevention or upward bound or urban ounce.
Ounce.
Well, where at on Hawkins is it near
They
United?
just moved. They're like over there. It's like a fire station over there, by Vernon Holden.
Okay.
Before you get to Morse Road,
Okay.
it's like a building on the left. It sits back. A lot of people don't know what's there. It's like a white square building.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll keep that in mind.
So it's away from Hawkins Plaza.
Well, it's about 3 blocks away.
Okay, 3 blocks away heading south on Market.
That's up.
So,
So it's like Kimmel.
Yeah, oh, toward Kimmel area, okay.
But I'm like them. I try to get everybody that, because a lot of people have jobs that don't need them. They're not beneficial, in other words, what I'm saying.
So did they have a survey form? Did she have a survey form?
yeah.
Oh, she did? Okay.
Yeah, look up, I'm on YouTube, multi-station smoke detector. Got a patent. I got 2
You have a
patents.
patent?
2 of them. I'm working on a third one.
For, say that again?
A smoke detector.
The smoke detector.
You got a solar powered smoke detector. Check it out. It's nice.
What's your name?
Patrick Jordan.
Patrick Jordan?
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. I'm give it some thought. At the time, lady I was in contact with, she said that they were in need of anybody to come up there and speak on Black History. Right.
That's what my son just did that interview.
Yeah.
They need people to say anything. So,
Especially right now, in this time of year, we
Right.
need to be like,
Right.
right. out there.
right.
If they can't come, we can hear it.
Here. I know you was a kid. You see that? You know what I'm saying? Think about it. Any professors or teachers?
Fashion design.
Fashion? Now, I know you also there's something with the
You
mail.
can be a guest there. You know, at this station, you go there and just like talk about like your long year. You know.
I'm on LinkedIn. Are you still on LinkedIn?
I think so. I have I've been trying to do a long time.
Yeah, I do use LinkedIn for my networking with different people.
Yeah.
I'm probably on Facebook, to be honest. I'm on LinkedIn, like professional network.
Yeah. But then you'll get a lot too.
Right.
Because there's so much that you know. But they're interested on what you're saying. You know what I mean?
You look tired.
I know.
Yeah,
All right, it's nice meeting you.
You too. You take care, kid. Tell Mike hello.
I will.
Okay?
Tell your partners.
Okay, I sure will.
Bye, Gabe.
All right, Ken.
I will see
See you
you.
later.
Are you going back to work?
No, I'm taking off.
Good. Nice to see Gabe. So like,
Yeah.
I'm glad you stopped by.
Yeah.
Did you buy anything over there? Did you buy tea?
I did eat. I did.
Who showed up? Me. All the way to Paris.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, everybody got other stuff going on. So I'm still appreciative of who was who.
Of course.
Just the beginning.
Of course. So do you know like when is your next one so we can like broadcast it?
Well, I am giving a lecture at the World Church. As far as schools, I have stuff in the works, but nothing has been made official yet.
The word
I'll let
church
you
in
know.
Akron.
Please.
Did you talk to I know you have a connection with Akron Urban League.
Akron Urban League?
Yeah.
Yeah, Fred Wright, the CEO.
You can talk to him and you know make a difference.
Yeah, because we know each other.
I know, exactly.
They have classes too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they have speakers too.
Right.
Or libraries.
Yep, libraries.
All right, Gabe.
All right, thanks, Candy. I appreciate it. Take care.
Bye.
That's all the stuff I know right now.
Yeah.
My sister is the last one. You can Google her name and her list of stuff comes up.
Again?
Yeah. Like not Noah, the tennis player.
Yeah.
All right. We my mother is from Dominican Republic, Ocho Island. Actually, she was born in San Domingo. Yeah, most people have heard of Dominican Republic, but right now is Utah. Yeah, that's like those. Yeah, all that. Yeah, but look up Monte Station Smoke Detector. That's what I got.
You got two.
Yeah, two patents, and I'm working on a third one right now.
Wow.
So you're an engineer?
No, actually, that's the other thing to look up too. Let me put that on. Ohio.com, they did an interview. I was in a Beacon Journal November 15th. You can look up Ohio. They did a special on inventors. I did a presentation in Hudson, the Hudson Library, and we came in 4th place out of 37. But a lot of times, I hate to say this, they already have predetermined who they're going to pick before you even do it. You just kind of like doing it just, especially predominantly what neighborhood they picking their friends.
Right.
But 4th place was pretty good. Wasn't bad. But yeah, you look up Ohio.com, they'll tell you basically what the invention is. It's like I said, the invention is probably 20 pages long on the patent. You can look it up at the PTO website and that's in DC. And then actually, if you look up Black inventors for this month, Patrick Jordan. Black inventors. So I'm trying, and it's been like 15 years. That first patent is
Look it up.
March 16th, 1999. Was the first time I passed. So, I'll just keep going. I'm done working. Now I'm working.
Really?
Yeah, I'm retired. 20 years.
Okay. Congratulations.
I'm trying. I hate to keep talking and toot my own horn, but if you look up that website, you'll see all the stuff that I've been trying to do because it goes in the. I don't know if you ever heard of a show called Shark Tank.
Yep.
15th of all time. Got the most votes to get on that show. See, it's a process. You gotta get like voted to just have votes. That was like probably 1,800 people. They had a casting call in Columbus. They did that just to get the votes. And once you get the votes, then they got picked. It's been since August. I'm trying to get them.
Oh, okay.
But I'm 15th when, all time, most votes. I got 903 votes. You need 100 to get on the show. Yeah. It's a good chance that, this might be it. But like I said, I've been trying to do this for over 15 years. Ain't like long before the day. It's just like, it's just like coming up here and, like I said, I know what I thought I knew a lot, but you taught me a lot too.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, there was a lot on there.
Yeah, it was a lot on there. I was like, every time I feel like, can you hit me with something I don't know? Wow.
Appreciate it. Quite impressive.
Yeah. And it's just educated.
Right. Yeah.
You don't know something, you gotta learn something. That's why I try to tell you kids. But yeah, I put his website stuff on there too, so you look that up. Like, look up Good Morning America tomorrow. That's
Okay.
7 o'clock, and I think it's 10 o'clock again.
Okay, what's he on there for?
He's doing a presentation with the LeBron James Foundation.
Okay.
That's who he works for.
Okay.
And they sent him, I just took him this morning to catch a plane to go to New York.
Okay.
So they going it's like kind of like they say top secret. They don't really tell us. They just say watch the show. Watch the show.
Right.
You know. So
What's your son's name?
Pierce Jordan.
Pierce Jordan.
Okay. You said he works for LeBron James' foundation. Okay.
He's a senior at Firestone High School.
Okay.
So like if you look up his site, I put that on there too. LeBron's website, they featured my son for his school council president.
Okay.
So they featured him about what they've been doing, what they're going to do, but to find out what they're going to do while All-Star Weekend, you'll go on the website and it tells you like every day they're going to do something. And it's like I always tell people, you know, some people don't like LeBron, you know, for whatever reason. He's doing more for us than anybody.
Right.
You know, he is.
Yeah.
That's why I tell people to watch that show because it says what we're going to do. And what it is. 23 things he's giving away. I mean, different sites is going to 23. That's a lot of sites.
Yeah.
You know, from today to Sunday, they're going to be giving away coats to homeless shelters, computers, instruments to music classes, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Coats, what do you call it, sleeping bags, all kinds of stuff. They're doing McDonald's today. They're giving away, people come in, they lock the door. Whoever's in McDonald's, they're getting free.
Really?
They're doing that today. So it's I think.
Yeah, he is doing a lot.
Because you don't have to. You can just take his check, go home like everybody else. You know? He's making, and people say, well, he's not giving away Nike is, but he's making Nike give it away.
Yeah, right. Because of his image.
Right. Because they're making
Because I think
money.
he's going to be doing a game show or something, isn't he?
Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that that's like, they're giving away like $2 million. You got to think
I didn't know how much.
Yeah, you got to, because you could apply online. People don't know that. They think that you got to go to casting course. You can apply online. They can show.
Right.
That's
So
$2 million.
there must be some kind of a profile of the type of characters that they're looking for, people that they look for.
Right.
In order for you not to have to go to a casting call.
Right.
Is this LeBron James?
What is it called? New casting show or something like that. I could write that down. I can email that to you. I got it on my phone. It's a whole bunch of stuff.
Isn't that what they did a week or so ago?
We deal with that.
Isn't that what they did a week or so ago? At the Word Church? Yeah.
Yeah, I heard they did it in Cleveland, so I imagine that was the word.
Yeah.
It just says new show for LeBron James casting call. Now that were made in that word, LeBron James. So I guess you just type in new game show LeBron James and it should pop up.
Who?
Yeah, Google or you know how any engine search.
Okay.
Yeah, actually works. You can have that. I'm dealing with that can't do that. All right, so
All right,
nice
take
talking to
care.
you. All
You
right.
too. So that computer belongs to this room.
Oh, yeah.
You're supposed to leave it here. You're not supposed to give it back to anybody so they can make sure it's
No, I leave.
secure. Okay.
Just leave everything the way it is.
Oh, okay.